Hello, and welcome back to an all-new episode of Sam Spans the World. I'm your host, Samantha Bremekamp, and on this week's episode, 'tis the season to hibernate some of our beautiful garden friends, including dahlias. We live in an area that can get a little bit too cold for them in the winter. Plus, if you leave them in the ground, you might run the risk of some of our little furry friends who are desperate for food coming in the winter and gnawing away. And you may not even realize it until things should be blooming and they haven't. So, we're going to learn all about harvesting back the dahlia corms, labeling them, separating them out as they continue to expand if they're healthy, happy plants, and also collecting and labeling seeds. It's really easy. I do it every year, and you're going to learn with me because there's no better time to start than today. Hello, friends. It's that sad in between time where the garden starts to look a little bit sad. And sure, we're getting flowers still, but the zinnias are basically kicked. I don't know about you, but my tomatoes are going absolutely bonkers. As are the marigolds. So some things have to be taken down or to come out, and other things can stay. But one of the things that we're going to be doing, or you're going to be doing with me, is taking out all of the dahlias that are now kicked and prepping them to be overwintered, stored inside until next time, because our winters here, I fear, get a little bit too cold. And also, think of this, in the winter, there's not as much to eat. So the animals get a little bit more desperate and start eating tubers and stuff more so than any other time of year. So we're going to be taking it down, packing it up, tucking it in, and giving it a nice slumber until it's time for us to undo all of this in the spring. So first things first, when cutting down the zinnia, I'm going to be cutting them really low, and then I'm going to be collecting the heads that have seeds. I'm using a flower pot that's not being used right now because, it's almost winter. And this is going to be wonderful because you're going to be able to use them next year. And a lot of them you can leave them if you don't mind it being so unsightly. And they have a great potential to reseed themselves if you want to do that. Like if you have it in your backyard or something and you don't mind it getting scraggly. But I have them in the front also, so trying to clean it up, make it look nice for the neighborhood. I don't want them to kick me out already. And if you're wondering, how can you tell what's ready to give you seeds and what's not? Like I'm cutting these down too, just because they're not really blooming that nicely. But I'm not going to grab this for seeds because it's not ready. However, I am going to grab that. Well, because that is absolutely primed and ready for seeds. Those seeds are ready to go. So that's how you do it. The really pretty flower that's kind of not that pretty. No. The super dead looking cone thing. Yes. And that is how you know what is ready to be taken in for seeds and what should just get kicked to the curb. So I'm with some of the dahlias, and you remember how much I love to recycle like yogurt containers, labeled it with a big fat marker. And I'm writing, of course, some of these too, what type they are. Now, even if you get a mix of dahlias and you're not exactly sure, you can look them up by taking a photo of it and doing like a photo search. But these ones were super cool. They had like darker foliage, which I wasn't expecting, and a beautiful sunset type of coloring going on. And I looked them up because they're part of a mix that I got, and they're called First Love. So my heart. So I'm going to easily just start deadheading these and putting them in a cup. That's the easiest way to do it. And then I'm going to let that cup sit in the basement for a little bit until it fully dries out because, we keep having rain and all that stuff. So you don't want to put anything away that's soggy because that's just going to cause rot and mold, and that's just going to totally ruin your hopes and dreams of your garden for next year. But really easy. A marker, a container, deadheading until it's time for you to really take the seeds out and start putting them into the envelopes that are also labeled. Super easy. Just real quick to show you, some of these are really ready, and you can tell they sound wispy, like they're dried, like paper. Those are the ones that I can easily pick and put in my cup. But this one, this is brand new, and that's still going to bloom because our weather is crazy. So I'm not going to pick that one. I look forward to it blooming, which means I'm not going to pull this specific dahlia up yet to get the tubers ready. It still has a few buds left. There's about like a half a dozen, and I'd rather see the flowers. That would make me happier. But in the meantime, I could take all of the straw feeling, papery feeling, seed wielding buds that have finished off and start that way, one thing at a time. Takes a village or a village of one. Quick pro tip: when you're collecting seeds of any variety, maybe don't do it on a windy day. Okay. So an important part of taking your dahlia tubers and getting them ready to be stored inside, if you live in a cold area in the winter, which we kind of do, is to make sure you label the corms. I do this before I even pull them out of the ground and trim them down. Because once you start removing everything, there might not be any clues to what kind it is. And sure, it could just be like a fun mystery surprise for next year, but if you're trying to plan it out, you have a color scheme going or a pattern or something, I highly recommend using gaffer tape, a Sharpie, and scissors. And when you are going to attach it to the corm itself, which often sticks out of the ground a little bit. Don't just attach it to the stem because you're going to actually be cutting that off. So that's then useless. But with these warm weather days that are so random, it's perfect time to do it and to prep it before it gets back to cold weather. So. Okay, so we're going to do this together where we're going to take out on this really warm day before the cold comes back, because we've already had a frost, the dahlia tuber. Now, my hope is that there's offshoots, and I'll show you how to separate them so then you have multiple of these things. But some things you might need: some kind of shovel. You can also use a kitchen spoon. I do that all the time. Some little clippers, because once you dig it up, and only after you dig it up, do you then trim it down. The understanding is that if you trim it down now before digging it up, all the moisture that's left is going to make it soggy, and you don't want the tuber to get soggy. So you might want to use gloves. Depending on the type of soil you're using and trying to get the things out of, you might want to just go bare hands because you want to feel around and you don't want to break it or hurt it. As you recall, I built up all these little mounds with bags of loose soil and then covered it with different types of mulch. So I don't have to dig that deep, and I know it's loose because I put it in, so I won't be having that issue. But if you have an established garden or you've let it sit for a couple years and it's expanded, you're going to want to carefully dig around it, give it a wide berth, and go deep, and then pull it out, and then trim off the stem and the roots just to leave the tubers. I know it sounds a little backwards sometimes, but that is how you do it, and with a great success rate. So stick with me. We're going to get lower so you can actually see up close and personal with the dirt. And I've already labeled them with gaffer tape and Sharpie to the corm. So again, not the stem, but the corm, because that's what's going to remain. And when you store it, you'll know what tube is which. Yes, it's fun sometimes to have like a mystery. But if you're planning out your garden for next year and you're trying to spread out the colors or the shapes or varieties of things like dahlias, it is a great help to already have it labeled. But you'll see, because we're doing it together. So sit tight. I'm going to gently wipe away, because remember, I built this hill and I added other things like sea holly, which is what this is, which will remain and grow next year. But right now, I'm digging down to where making room, start lower so that when you're sliding stuff, oh yeah, there's so many corms now, which is awesome. Okay. Put this a little bit better. You see there's so many corms in here. So we're carefully digging it out. Now remember, because I added soil, I'm not afraid of hitting anything or, harming anything, because this is all loose soil that I planted. I'm being mindful of this plant as I slowly uproot this guy. Do double hands. Make it a little easier on myself, being so close to the ground. Okay. Once I get to the roots part, I don't mind just pulling the roots because the roots were taking off anyway. But this is what it looks like. And then we are going to bring it in, and I'm going to show you how to clean it up and store it for next year, which is awesome. So I'm just going to repeat these steps a bunch of times. And you want the best of the best because you want the best variety of these flowers. So I only want ones that feel really firm, like a really tough potato. If they are mushy, throw them out or throw them in the compost. If they, or actually don't throw them in the compost because they might have some kind of rot that could spread if you're moving soil from your compost. So a little lesson learned, but that's it. And on to the next part. Okay, so successfully I have gathered these. They're labeled. Wanted to point out that carefully digging around it, you're to find some solo ones that are not labeled. So if you just grab an empty planter, which you're going to have a slew of from the gardening season that you keep and reuse every year, and just put the big separate pieces with them. That way when you're putting them in a tray or however you're going to organize them before you put them away for their hibernation, you have them all together and you're not like, which did this little guy go to? Super helpful, saves you a tremendous headache, and could not be easier. Label, save, throw in a bucket. Now becomes the part where we chop off the excess because we don't need it anymore. We don't need it wasting energy. So where the label is, I'm going to cut just above it. That's it. This is going to go into compost or whatever. And now we have these guys, which I will shake off, snip the roots, and get ready. So as I'm digging this stuff out, it's covered in dirt, understandably. So I just rinsed it with a hose. I'm going to sit it in the sun out on my back deck for a little bit to let it dry out. And then I'm going to start working my magic of separating some of these. Look how huge. I need more hose to get that dirt off. But there's like so many, and all of those can basically become their own. Awesome, dirty, and fun. From before, the giant group of corms that I was rinsing off with the hose, now they're in a protected area getting sun. They're on my deck. And I put everybody together just so they all felt good. They could all dry out a little bit, not too much, just a little. And then I'll show you how to separate them and store them. Now that we have all of the dahlia clumps, harvest some of the dirt knocked off and brought inside, I thought it was really important to show you, for those that are motivated to separate out your super clumped up dahlias, should you have any, to understand how to do it, what to look for, and just some simple things to keep an eye out for. Speaking of eyes, as I was digging up one of the clumps, which you see in the video, it popped out, and this had already separated from the group and has its own eyes growing, which I will try to do some close-up shots after this with a different setup. But so I know that this is its own thing, and I've been keeping it with the labeled one, the mothership, if you will, so that I don't forget who this is. By the way, this is a Great Silence, which is those beautiful, vibrant, ever flourishing pink sunsetty ones, which is just, love them so much. But if you have a giant clump and you're trying to figure out, is there room for me to get in there and carefully perform surgery on them? A really big, easy way to tell, not just people who have been doing this forever look for like the little eyes, the little bumps that are growing, which I'll try to show you. But here's like a clear indicator. This is its own offshoot. I'll put that in front of the black background. This is the original offshoot, and this is a third. And if you look closely, you could see how they almost look like different hands interlocked. So there's a clear indicator of what corms go with which offshoot. And that is how I will be separating these 3 clumps. Sometimes you get really long, wild, crazy clumps like this. And if you are not sure if there's a clear indicator, and this is like your first year doing it, the first time you've had this clump, you don't have to separate them. You can just put them in the ground and let them grow another season and then make it more obvious for where they want to be separated. But like this situation, I am not interested in separating right now. So it's not going to happen. But obviously for this one, there's 3 different clumps that are going to come out of here, which is pretty sweet. And this one has a couple too of offshoots. So I know I can follow that. It's almost like being very careful, as if taking apart a bomb, which I have 0 experience in, but I have watched TV and movies, and following the plant to make it as effortless as possible and to have the least resistance. And I also keep them in the containers with their labeled names, because you're going to be taking things out, cutting them up. All of a sudden they don't have labels, but you can see the container they just came out of to be like, oh, right, okay, those are the Blue Boy dahlias. I know that's where they came from. And yes, some things might get mixed up eventually, but it's okay. Garden surprises are really fun. And it's, you just have to give up a little bit of control in the garden, which is understandable because you can only do so much. So I'm now going to show you how to store them. Sit tight. It is really important to store your bulbs, your corms, your tubers in a way that keeps them safe from rot, safe from shriveling up, and safe from being accessed by small friends that are furry and really love to eat this stuff. So what I like to use and what I'm going to be using is that shredded hay that I loved putting around the garden as like a light mulch for seed starting or for young plants being transferred. And by reusing these containers, because we all have a million of them continuously, if you're big into gardening, and by putting some of this in each of the different containers and then storing it in a Rubbermaid, it'll keep it dark, dry, safe. It's going to live in the basement. I would not keep it in the garage just because of the different temperatures going on in there and access to small French who are really good at breaking into things, especially if you have giant doors opening all the time, plus light coming in. So the basement, or if you have a closet, those are my suggestions for you. But I'm going to show you now by just taking some of this, putting it in, and understand, of course, there's big holes in the bottom of this. So ideally, it would already be in the giant Rubbermaid thing or whatever container that you're going to use. But it's super easy. You just make sure it goes around. You have to make sure it's dry. You do not want to use damp straw. And then you just, if you're going to layer them, like you have multiple of the same variety, so you're going to keep them together like I would do, just so I have a better chance of when I go to plant them next spring, I could try to color coordinate it the way I would like to. I mean, realistically, these beautiful colors are going to look great regardless. But I'm going to try my hand in it. But it's really, really easy. And just to make room in here to show you again. Just hold on to this. And yes, it's going to make a huge mess. And yes, I'm doing it in the kitchen, but that's for the show. You could do this outside. So you make less of a mess. And then just bring in the Tupperwares, or the Tupperware. The Rubbermaid's not going to be heavy because it's straw and fairly light tubers or corms or bulbs or whatever it is. So don't be afraid of adding stuff into that and then bringing it inside. It's not that hard, not that big of a deal. Starting on the bottom with about this much and just taking the clump. Yes, I'm separating these, but this is just demonstrating how to do it. Oh, you're also going to want to clip off the roots. You don't have to, but I highly suggest it because it will really focus all of the energy on new growth and new life for the new season. You know, it's like why it's important to get haircuts, because you want healthy hair to establish, to remain, to show up. And it's super, super easy, super fun and messy. And once everything is on the floor of the Rubbermaid, just to show you, like, this is what the inside looks like now. I'm going to then put the rest of the shredded straw in and around it, enveloping it in a really soft shredded straw blanket. Really easy, really fun. You can do it. Makes a huge difference. That way you're not playing the game of, I hope my friends survived. Did they? And instead they're like, I know they survived because I checked on them once a month across the winter until I realized that everybody was okay. When harvesting seeds, I like to collect them when I'm out, either in a baggie temporarily or in one of these recycled containers that once held chicken or whatever. It's easier to continuously put them in the same container so that they don't get confused. It's easier for you to then, in a tray like this, open it and just get the seeds out. And once you're sure that they're all completely dry and you have all the seeds that are dry, I love using these little manila envelopes. I write the variety, the date, and then put it aside. And of course, with these marigolds, which you've seen the gardener continuously just going crazy, I like to make a bunch of bags. I don't want to overstuff it. I want to put just enough. And then I make a second one and a third one. And then I have a seed sharing party in March to get all of my gardening friends super pumped, and we swap seeds and things. And I know that I'll always have enough because I'm not jamming them all into one thing. Paper is king here with gardening because you do not want moisture to collect or make your seeds rot. And also, you see later on, we use the plastic baggies with a little wet paper towel to start the seeds in March, April, when starting things inside, which you've seen that episode, or if not, check. But it's really easy. Just label everything. Don't do what I do sometimes where I'm like, I'll remember what seeds they are. Some seeds are really obvious. A lot of seeds are not. When in doubt, write it out. Couldn't be easier and more helpful for your next super way more successful garden. Oh, hello. You're probably wondering why Marmalade's over there wearing a donut. Well, don't worry about her. She got spayed, so she's recovering. But I wanted to show you I am growing very specific types of crocus that have saffron. It's my first time trying it, but you see the flowers are already starting to emerge. I put it in a hanging basket because I have a feeling a lot of animals are going to be interested. But I'm going to show you. So I have it up there for safety. But I have one that's already in the one random one. I just wanted to see, always trying it in different types of planters. And you can see this red part. That is the saffron. It was super easy. They come in a bulb, plant them, give them sun and water, and then boom. You're supposed to plant them between September and October. I got them in just in time in October, and now I'm going to pluck the red because a lot of animals like to eat it too, like deer, squirrels, chipmunks, whoever. I get it. It's delicious. Nature at its best. 2 more crocuses opened, both containing saffron. So excited. I'll show you. There you go. There's the saffron. I grab that quick and then put it out to dry. Or look how just stunning that is. Stunning. I just wanted to share my first time ever growing saffron. It took no time at all. And you could see these red things, that's the actual saffron. It's a type of crocus that grows. But once you get the corms, and you plant them immediately, or actually they're bulbs. Once you get the bulbs and you plant them immediately, they like pop up overnight, it seems. I think because our warm weather's been happening, but super cool. That one little crocus had 3 little red tendrils, which is saffron. Not all of them will have it. Some might only have 2, but collect it as it opens before animals get to it. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Sam Explains the World. I'm your host, Samantha Bremekamp, who looks forward to seeing you next Friday, 9 p.m. on BCTV.